Welcome to the show that takes up no more than 5 minutes of your time, but could help you gain massive real estate knowledge. It's 5 Minutes in Real Estate with best-selling author Shane Willis.
Hello, it's Shane Willis, Pensacola real estate expert, bringing you today's episode. It's Wednesday. Actually stopped raining today, so of course it's Florida, so give it 5 minutes. By the time I get finished walking this block and recording this episode, it'll probably be raining again. Right now we got George here in the background chirping, and looks like we're gonna have a nice little walk. A little later than normal today recording it, but that's all right. Jiu-jitsu went a little long. There were some lessons. Had some fun there. We're going to talk today about the understanding that a property actually has to sell twice in order to close. I talked about this a little bit last week, and I'm going to put a link to my rant last week about the Wall Street Journal article. So if you haven't gone back and listened to that one, click the link on that one and go back and listen to it, because I've gotten quite a bit of response on that. But what do I mean by a house has to sell twice? What do we have to sell it to twice? Well, you first have to sell it to the buyer. If you're selling the property, you have to sell it to the buyer. Next, you have to sell it to the bank. Now, what exactly do you mean I have to sell it to the bank? Well, it's funny that a buyer hires or pays for an appraisal, unless it's negotiated for the seller to pay for it. I shouldn't say a buyer always does it, but typically a buyer pays for an appraisal. And people wonder if the appraiser is working for the buyer because the buyer is the one who pays for it, but they're not. The appraiser does not work for the buyer. The appraiser does not work for the seller. The appraiser's job is to work for the bank. Now, this is what caused us a little bit of trouble back in 2006 before the crash. The appraiser is set out to ensure that the bank is lending on an asset that is truly valued at what everybody's saying it valued at. And back when I owned a mortgage company, the process, the 2004, the process was very simple. I had a couple of appraisers that I used. I'd call them up and go, hey, I need to get an appraisal done. They'd go do an appraisal, move on. But the relationship was there. I had a relationship with the appraisers. A lot of mortgage lenders took advantage of that relationship and said, hey, not only do I need an appraisal, but I needed to come in at 200 when it really shouldn't have come in any more than 190. So, part of the laws that came out because of the crash said that we need to separate that relationship, that relationship should not exist. Well, remember I said the appraiser actually works for the banker. I was that lender, so how do you separate that? How do you separate from everyone to where an appraisal can be truly an individual assessment of the property? Well, they implemented third parties to where basically, I don't care if you're Navy Federal Credit Union, Regions Bank, or Bob's Lending, you can't call an appraiser up and say, hey, here's the appraisal, this is what I want to use it for. Instead, you have to call this third party who has a list of round robins appraisers that they go, okay, you're next. And they have to do that on the list, on a rotating list. Those third parties have guidelines and rules that they have put in place that says, okay, we can't use the same one. We have to go to the next one. We have to show that we went to the next one, just to try and curb that impropriety that was happening some. So today, one of the reasons I'm bringing it up today is because we're actually seeing appraisers agree more with the sales price or what the sellers think the value of the property is. They're agreeing more than they have in the last 3 years. It's a little difficult when you go to do an appraisal to factor in appreciation. There are some sellers that are really high. I'm seeing some of the builders that have gone a little higher, and part of that cost is the timber costs. Wood costs have gone sky high since some of the tariffs across the border have gone into play. But Got an ECA truck basically blocking the neighborhood. I'm not quite sure how you're going to get through there. Oh, there. That's a good way of doing it. Go the opposite side of the road. So, what am I talking about today with appraisers? Why did I bring it up? Homeowners and appraisers see the most eye to eye on price in the last 3 years. Last week, when I talked about it on the Wall Street Journal, the writer said that the appraisal came in at exactly what the purchase price was. And if you listen to last week's episode, I told him, I said, one of the reasons it came in that way, well, let me back up, because he argued, he said, well, what happens if, my first offer would have been accepted, which was lower, would it have appraised at that? Maybe. And here was my argument back to him. The first part of an appraisal of a purchase contract, not a refinance, but a purchase contract, is what is a buyer willing to pay for it, and what is a seller willing to sell it for? Okay. Now, they still can't just say, okay, in my neighborhood, there's somebody willing to pay me $700,000 for this house, and I'm willing to sell it to them for $700,000. Well, the bank's lending off that $700,000, so they hire the appraisers that the buyer pays for to make sure the property really is worth $700,000, and they're going to look at past sales and go, even with some appreciation, no, I don't think that the house is worth $700,000. Not right now. Could it one day? Sure. The way things are going, yeah. Give this about 15, 20 years and it'll probably be worth $700,000. But that's a totally different conversation. So what I brought this up today is, as we're seeing prices appreciate, some of the problems we ran into last year, I haven't seen it as much this year, but last year we saw it quite a bit, was, a property would be under contract for $260 and the appraisal would come in at $250. Because they did not count the appreciation as much as the seller did. So Shane, what happens if it does come in at $250? Well, there's a couple of options. Either A, the contract's going to die, especially if it's a VA loan because they won't lend on it. B, the buyer can pay the difference, meaning that $250 to $260, they just bring the extra $10,000. That typically doesn't happen because the buyer goes, well, it's only worth $250. I'm not going to pay you $260 for it now. Or C, the seller can drop the price down, 10 grand, down to the appraised value and move on with the closing. That's typically what happens. Sometimes they split the difference. There's a lot of renegotiating, but that can actually kill deals. The whole reason I bring it up on today's episode is because that killing of deals is actually at their lowest it's been in 3 years. Appraisers are kind of agreeing, they're understanding, they're seeing the appreciation value, and the right people are putting stuff under contract that it's at the right price. It's not ridiculous. And some people, some of it was flat out mortgage fraud. Remember that thing where I said, hey, my house for $700,000 and a buyer would pay me $700,000? There's times when people do that just to commit fraud. But the appraiser is in place there to make sure the bank's not getting suckered out of $500,000-$600,000 loan on a $700,000 house, which is really only worth $500,000. Anyways, it's good news. I don't want to go down that dark trail. It is good news that we are sitting here seeing those two people, the sellers and the appraiser, actually see eye to eye for the first time, or for the most that they've seen eye to eye in the last 3 years. So that's good news. All right, hopefully that wasn't confusing a little bit. Make sure you go check out the post and the show notes. I'll actually explain it a little bit better, and also show you some graphs. Now, if you're not getting the tips, the graphs, all the other stuff, the tricks, the links to where I'm getting all this information, get over to 5minutesinrealestate.com. That's 5minutesinrealestate.com. Also, if you've not subscribed to the podcast, we're on iTunes, Google Play, Android Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, pretty much anywhere you want to. I think we're there. I don't think we're on, what is that? It's not Twitch. That's something for the kids. Anyway, some other player I don't think we're on, but for the majority of it, if you're probably listening to this, we're probably on it. Get over there, hit subscribe so you can make sure we catch every update, every episode as we do it. Give me a thumbs up, give me a like, give me a nice comment, and also, finally, I never asked for any money for these. I do, however, ask that if I bring value at all from this or any other episode, that you wind up sharing it on social media. All right, it's a beautiful Wednesday. Go enjoy the rest of the week.